let me go into one thing real quick. The VA does not lend any money. All righty, here we go. One question I get all the time is, what exactly is a VA loan? Very simply, a VA loan is that the VA is guaranteeing 25% of your loan amount. I'm going to go into a lot more depth on what a VA loan actually is, how you use it, and all of that. But I think it's important to understand kind of where the VA loan came from. So let's start there. The VA loan started way back in 1944 as you had hundreds of thousands of men and women serving overseas in World War II, and they're coming back. There was actually a bill passed called the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, and it became known as the GI Bill. So the GI Bill was loans for small businesses, it was loans to go to school, and it was also included the VA home loan benefit. And so what it was is essentially, like I said, it's a 25% guarantee of your loan amount. So let's say, for example, that you're going to buy a house that's $400,000. The VA is guaranteeing 25% of that to the bank. So what that looks like is your loan is for 400,000. If for some reason you were to be foreclosed upon, the bank only has to sell your house for $300,000 to the next person, because the VA is going to make up that difference. Whatever money that the bank loses, the VA will make up to $100,000 or 25% of the loan amount. So at its core, that's what a VA loan is. It's just the VA guaranteeing a certain portion of your loan. So the reason that's important is because that guarantee lowers the risk for the bank that is lending money to you. That gives you, as the veteran, a lot of benefits. So interest rate, for instance, is all about risk. So a higher risk loan, like if you have really, really low credit and you've had a bunch of missed payments, all that sort of stuff, that's a higher risk loan to a bank. And so your interest rate is going to be higher. The nice thing about this guarantee that you're going to get from the VA is that lowers the risk tremendously. And so you get a number of benefits. Number one is your interest rate is going to be much lower than any sort of conventional loan. Number two, even though you're not putting down a down payment, or you don't have to put down a down payment, you don't have what's called PMI. PMI is simply mortgage insurance, private mortgage insurance. And PMI is what a conventional loan uses to provide that level of comfort for a bank. Like if you don't put 20% down on a conventional loan, you have to pay PMI monthly, which is just an insurance policy where if you get foreclosed on down the road, that the bank makes up some of their money if they're not able to sell your house for as much as what you owed on it. So that's what PMI is. But on a VA loan, the beautiful thing is you don't pay PMI because of the 25% guarantee from the VA. So over the years, since the VA loan was designed in 1944, there were a number of things that have changed. And so what you knew or thought you knew about a VA loan in the past is no longer potentially accurate. For instance, when it first started, your VA loan benefits were only good for 10 years after you left the service. Now, your VA loan benefits never expire. So as long as you serve the requisite amount of time for whatever period of history that you served in the military, your benefits do not expire. Two is, a lot of people think that once you've used your VA loan one time, that you can never use it again. And that's absolutely not true. You can use the VA loan multiple times. As a matter of fact, that leads into the next one. You can actually have multiple VA loans. I've seen people with 2, 3, even 4 VA loans active at the same time. So you live in one house, you get orders to PCS to the next place, and you can actually keep your current house in a VA loan and then use your VA loan benefits, whatever remaining entitlement you have, to buy that second house and potentially even a third or a fourth. So there's some math that goes into it, a bunch of calculations we have to do to figure out how much eligibility you have remaining. But it is possible to have multiple VA loans at the same time. And then one of the last myths that, not the last myth, but another thing that we hear all the time is, hey, this house may be a jumbo loan. You know, it's $1 million, it's $1.5 million. You can't do a VA loan on that. And that's absolutely false as well. As a matter of fact, we've done VA loans for people who have done loans up to, say, $4 million. Well, heck, if you can afford a $4 million house, you can do a VA loan with no down payment. You can leave your money. You probably have other money, right? And so you could leave that money invested somewhere else and still do a zero down VA loan up to, there really is no cap on it from the VA, as long as you don't have eligibility currently used in some other property. So all of these things about a VA loan just line up perfectly for veterans to use the VA loan benefit. I actually think it's the best product on the marketplace in mortgage. Another couple of things about it is that the VA loan gives me as an originator a ton of flexibility. Like, for instance, you can have higher debt to income ratios because, like I said, that VA guarantee takes a lot of risk out of this for the bank. And so we're willing to approve you at a higher debt ratio than what you would get from a conventional or even an FHA loan. So that's one thing. Another thing would be that you can have some credit missteps. So you can have potentially a lower credit score with some maybe some missed payments on a credit card or something like that. So some credit missteps in the past are more likely, you're more likely to be able to get approved on a VA loan. Even things like bankruptcy or previous foreclosures, it's more lenient after those events to get a VA loan than it would be on any other type of loan. So those are some other things about a VA loan. And now another common misconception that I hear all the time about VA loans is people think that the VA is actually lending money. And that's absolutely not true. The VA doesn't lend anybody a penny. Um, Really, what it is the VA has set a basic set of rules and says if you're going to do a VA loan, number one, the person has to have served the requisite amount of time. So they've got some, if you were active duty, you had to have served at least 2 years in active duty. If you served a year, 11 months, and 28 days, unless that 12th month was February, you wouldn't have VA loan benefits. If you were a reservist or National Guard and you only served 4 years in the National Guard and you were never called up to active duty, you wouldn't be eligible. So there's some rules as far as the time served. But on top of that, there's 6,000 lending institutions in the United States or more, and each one of those is allowed to kind of make their own rules as far as, hey, we're gonna lend money to these people based on this set of rules. So the VA puts some basic guidelines in place. But they don't, for instance, they don't have a credit score requirement. The VA says, we don't care. As long as you served, we'll guarantee that loan for you. A bank is probably not going to loan you money if you have a 420 credit score, but every bank is going to be different. So some banks will say, hey, minimum of 620. Some might say 680. But then there are banks that will lend money to a veteran at, let's say, 580, 560, 540, down to 500. There are even ways to get loans if you have zero credit score altogether, which is different than having bad credit. Having no credit is potentially not such a bad thing. But there are ways to get loans in even those situations. So what we call that is that there are overlays. Every bank has its own set of overlays. And so imagine you've got the basic set of rules, and then a bank will put their own rules on top of that. They'll overlay that on top of the loan. So every lending institution will have a little bit different rules on what you need to do to get a loan. So with 6,000 lending institutions out there in the United States, there are potentially 6,000 different VA loans. So if you're getting a no answer from somebody, that's okay. There may be somebody else that's willing to do it. You just might have to search a little bit harder to get it. So be wary. If anybody acts like they're the VA, if they talk like they're the VA, they probably aren't the VA. That's what I got to say about that.